Bishop T.D. Jakes, the leader of Dallas megachurch, the Potter's House, announced today that he will be stepping down. Jakes is a world-renowned pastor.
One of the most influential churches in America is facing growing scrutiny as reports of declining attendance continue to spark widespread discussion. T.D. Jakes' 8,000-seat congregation has long stood as a symbol of remarkable growth and influence, making recent developments all the more surprising. As questions spread across social media and religious circles, many are wondering what is driving the reported decline and whether it signals a temporary challenge or a deeper shift. So what is really happening behind the scenes, and why are so many people paying close attention? Let's find out. When the crowd becomes uncertain, the Potter's House of Dallas stands at the center of an uncomfortable question. For years, its enormous scale and powerful reputation have suggested strength. Now, the issue is no longer simply how large the church is. The deeper question is whether that size still guarantees the same loyalty and physical attendance it once appeared to command. That distinction matters because a church can have a large membership while its weekly seats tell a different story. And when the institution is one of America's most recognizable Black megachurches, even uncertainty can become impossible to ignore. Founded in 1996 by T.D. Jakes, the Potter's House grew into far more than a place where people gathered for worship. Jakes became the voice most closely connected to its identity, and his influence helped shape the church's public image over decades. His sermons, leadership, and presence became deeply familiar to the people who looked to the ministry for guidance. The church's publicly cited membership figure reflects the size of its wider community. But that number cannot automatically prove how many people are physically sitting inside the building on any given Sunday. That is where the mystery begins. A large membership figure may sound like proof of unstoppable strength, but membership and weekly attendance are not the same thing. Some members may attend regularly, others may participate less often, follow services through digital platforms, or remain connected to the institution without appearing in the seats every week. Without verified current attendance figures, it would be inaccurate to declare a specific collapse. Still, the question remains relevant because the wider religious landscape has changed dramatically. Across America, in-person religious participation has faced measurable pressure since the pandemic disrupted familiar routines. Churches that once depended on physical gatherings have had to confront a new reality. People can now remain connected to sermons, worship, and religious communities without always entering the same building every Sunday. That shift does not automatically mean people have abandoned faith. But it does change what attendance means, and it forces major institutions to reconsider how loyalty is measured. For the Potter's House, the timing creates an even sharper question. If the wider church landscape is changing, can a massive institution built around a powerful founder maintain the same physical pull? Are the seats showing a temporary adjustment, a broader cultural shift, or something more serious developing beneath the surface? No single explanation settles the mystery, but the uncertainty itself reveals the larger challenge. The Potter's House may still possess immense influence, yet its future cannot be judged by reputation alone. Somewhere between the membership numbers, the changing habits, and the empty spaces that may or may not be growing, a more important story is beginning to emerge. The mystery deepens. Was the pressure really coming from the seats or from somewhere far closer to the pulpit? What happens when the voice that built an institution begins to change? And could one unexpected shift at the center explain everything unfolding now? Let's find out. When the leader became vulnerable, on November 24, 2024, the atmosphere inside the Potter's House changed in a way few people could have expected. T.D. Jakes had just delivered an hour-long sermon when he experienced a serious medical emergency. At first, the church described what happened as a slight health incident, language that suggested a moment of concern, but little more. Then the story took a more serious turn. In later reporting, Jakes revealed that the episode had been a massive heart attack. The medical emergency quickly became more than a personal health crisis. For decades, T.D. Jakes had represented continuity at the Potter's house. He was the founder, the most recognizable voice, and the leader whose presence had become inseparable from the church's identity. Generations of worshipers had known the institution through him. His sermons shaped its public image, his leadership guided its growth, and his continued presence offered something powerful to a large congregation: familiarity. Then, suddenly, that familiar figure had become vulnerable. The significance of the moment was not simply that a famous pastor had suffered a serious health emergency. The deeper impact came from what the incident forced people to consider. What happens to an institution when the person most closely associated with its identity can no longer be assumed to stand at the center forever? For any organization, that question can be uncomfortable. For a church built around the influence of one extraordinary founder, it can become impossible to ignore. Still, the incident itself does not prove that people began leaving the Potter's house. There is no basis for claiming that the medical emergency directly caused an attendance collapse. The connection is more complicated than that. The event instead exposed a question that may have been waiting quietly in the background long before the emergency occurred. What does the future look like when the founder's role inevitably begins to change? Some observers could see the episode as a temporary health crisis with no lasting effect on the congregation. Others could view it as a reminder that even the strongest institutions must eventually confront succession, continuity, and change. Neither interpretation can be settled by the incident alone. But the timing created a new layer of uncertainty around a church already navigating a changing religious landscape. The question was no longer only whether people were attending. It was whether the institution's future could remain stable when its most familiar source of authority had suddenly been reminded of his own vulnerability. And that question would soon become far more immediate. For decades, T.D. Jakes seemed inseparable from the Potter's house, but what happens when the man at its center can no longer carry everything alone? Who was preparing for that possibility? And what decision would soon turn a private succession concern into a public leadership shock? Keep watching. A new era takes control. On April 27, 2025, T.D. Jakes made an announcement that transformed the future of the Potter's house from a distant question into an immediate reality. Sarah Jakes Roberts and Touré Roberts were announced as the next senior pastors of the church, marking a generational transfer at one of America's most recognizable megachurches. This was not simply a routine change in staffing. It was the moment a founder-led institution began preparing to move beyond the leader whose name, voice, and presence had shaped its identity for decades. Both Sarah Jakes Roberts and Touré Roberts were already connected to the wider world of ministry, making the transition appear less like a sudden replacement and more like a carefully prepared change in leadership. Yet even a planned succession can create uncertainty. In a church built around the influence of one extraordinary founder, leadership is never just about filling a position. It is about inheriting trust, preserving a culture, and convincing people that the future deserves the same loyalty as the past. That challenge becomes especially complicated when members have spent years forming a personal connection to T.D. Jakes. For many, he was not simply the person delivering sermons from the pulpit. He was the voice associated with the church's growth, its authority, and its public identity. His leadership had become part of the institution's emotional foundation. The arrival of new senior pastors therefore raised a question that no announcement could answer immediately. Would the congregation follow the office, or would it follow the individual who had occupied it? Sarah Jakes Roberts and Touré Roberts now faced the delicate balance between continuity and change. They would need to protect what longtime members recognized while establishing authority that belonged to them. Trying to copy Jakes too closely could make the new leadership appear dependent on his shadow. Moving too far in another direction could leave members wondering whether the church they knew was disappearing. At the same time, a younger generation may expect a different style of leadership, communication, and connection. That creates an opportunity, but also a potential divide. A transition that attracts new people could still unsettle those who feel most attached to the past. The succession announcement therefore became a natural test of institutional loyalty. It could stabilize the church by providing a clear path forward, or it could reveal how deeply the church's identity was tied to T.D. Jakes personally. The baton had changed hands, but the most important question remained unanswered. Would the people follow it? Yet the baton was changing hands at precisely the moment the ground beneath American church culture was shifting. Were Jakes' successors inheriting a thriving empire, or an institution already losing its gravitational pull? And what hidden force was quietly changing where millions chose to worship next? Stay with us. The worshiper no longer waits. The pressure facing the Potter's house is not coming from one dramatic event alone. It is developing inside a wider transformation that has changed how millions of people think about church attendance. The pandemic did not simply close buildings and then reopen them. It disrupted a habit that had once seemed almost automatic: gathering physically in the same place, at the same time, every week. National data from Pew Research Center showed a modest but measurable decline in monthly religious service attendance between 2019 and 2022. That shift does not prove that the Potter's house is losing members, and it cannot be used to claim that every national trend applies directly to the Dallas Church. But it reveals the environment in which the institution now operates. Physical attendance is no longer the only way people remain connected to religious teaching or a faith community. During the pandemic, some worshipers continued watching services online. Others attended less often, drifted between different communities, or gradually reduced their participation altogether. For many, the experience changed the meaning of Sunday morning. Once people discovered that sermons could reach them through a screen, the old assumption that powerful teaching required a massive building became weaker. The internet pushed that change even further, making the old advantages of size, production, and physical access far less exclusive than before. Megachurches once held a major advantage because they could offer polished sermons, music, and large-scale religious media that smaller churches could not easily match. Now, a smartphone can open the door to teachings from countless ministries, scholars, and communities around the world. A younger audience can compare preaching styles, explore different perspectives, and decide what feels meaningful without remaining tied to one physical institution. That creates a difficult question for a church of the Potter's house's scale. What does physical attendance offer that cannot be found online? Does a worshiper feel personally known inside a massive institution? Is the church providing a living community, or mainly delivering content that can now be accessed almost anywhere? Those questions do not automatically point to failure. A famous church can remain influential while becoming less central to the weekly lives of some people. Attendance can change without faith disappearing. Yet, the shift still creates pressure, because large institutions must now compete not only with other churches, but with convenience, choice, and personal connection for churches built on physical gathering. For the Potter's House, the challenge is therefore larger than empty seats. The audience itself has changed. And as the church tries to carry a powerful legacy into a new generation, the next question becomes impossible to avoid. Can its future feel personal enough to keep people connected? Yet the real pressure may be deeper than changing attendance habits. Can a legendary church remain powerful when its audience no longer needs one building? Can legacy still command loyalty from a generation demanding ownership? And what happens when the future begins questioning who truly controls it? Stay tuned. The legacy faces its test. For decades, T.D. Jakes was more than the senior pastor of the Potter's House. His name, voice, and leadership became woven into the identity of the institution itself. That is why the arrival of Sarah Jakes Roberts and Touré Roberts represents a challenge far greater than simply filling a vacant position. They are stepping into a legacy built over decades, carrying expectations shaped by a founder whose influence helped define the church's public character. The succession, therefore, raises three difficult questions. What must remain unchanged? What needs to evolve? And what, if anything, can be completely reimagined? Those questions matter because preserving a powerful institution is rarely as simple as transferring authority from one leader to another. The people who built their connection to the church through Jakes may expect continuity. A younger generation may expect something different. That tension creates a delicate path for the new leaders. If Sarah Jakes Roberts and Touré Roberts try to imitate Jakes too closely, their leadership could appear trapped inside his shadow. The comparison would always remain unavoidable, with every change measured against the founder's familiar style and influence. Yet, the opposite approach carries its own danger. If the institution changes too dramatically, longtime members may begin to wonder whether the church they joined is still recognizable. The difference between inheriting a platform and earning trust becomes crucial. A successor can receive a title, a pulpit, and an established organization. But trust cannot simply be transferred with them. It must be built through time, leadership, and the ability to connect with people who may have formed their strongest attachment to someone else. The transition is also more complicated because T.D. Jakes has not simply disappeared from the institution. The church's announcement described him as continuing in a broader role as chairman and spiritual overseer. His presence therefore remains part of the church's future, even as the senior pastoral leadership moves toward the next generation. That arrangement could provide stability. It could also make the transition more complex. The new leaders must establish their own authority while operating within a legacy that remains visibly connected to its founder. For the Potter's House, the future may depend on whether the church can remain large without feeling distant, modern without abandoning its identity, and familiar without becoming trapped in the past. The central conflict has now moved beyond attendance. The deeper issue is adaptation. A church can preserve its buildings, history, and name, yet still lose connection with the people it hopes to reach. And as the Potter's House enters this new era, the question becomes whether its greatest strength, its extraordinary legacy, could also become its greatest test. And that raises a far more dangerous question. Can a legacy survive without its founder at the center, or will adaptation quietly erase what made it powerful? As the final pressure points collide, one uncomfortable possibility emerges. What if the real crisis has only just begun? Stay glued. The future hangs in balance. The Potter's House now stands before its most important test, and the answer may not be visible in attendance figures alone. The central question is whether the church is truly losing people or whether it is moving through a broader transition that makes traditional measurements less revealing. A temporary dip in physical attendance is not the same as long-term disengagement. Online participation is not identical to sitting inside the building, and a member exploring a different form of worship may not necessarily have abandoned faith. That uncertainty makes the future difficult to read. The church can remain influential while some members attend less often. Others may continue following its services digitally. Some may seek smaller communities where personal relationships feel stronger. A younger generation may also measure loyalty differently from those who built their connection to the Potter's House during T.D. Jakes' most dominant years. The succession now becomes the ultimate test. The future could depend on whether the institution preserves the T.D. Jakes era, adapts it, or moves decisively beyond it. Continuity could allow the new leadership to protect the church's identity and stabilize its connection with existing members. Transformation could push the Potter's House toward a more digitally connected, relational, and generationally focused future. Fragmentation could create a different outcome, with some people remaining loyal to the legacy, while others search for spiritual communities that better match their changing expectations. None of those possibilities can be presented as a confirmed result. Public attendance data does not establish that the Potter's House has suffered a specific collapse, and the available evidence does not justify declaring that the church is simply emptying out. The real story is more complicated, and perhaps more revealing. The institution is navigating changing worship habits, a major leadership transition, and the difficult reality that the person most associated with its identity is no longer the only figure defining its future. That creates a tension no attendance chart can fully capture. A church may keep its name, buildings, influence, and history, while still having to rebuild its relationship with the people it hopes to retain and reach. The next era could preserve the strength of Jakes' legacy, reshape the institution for a new generation, or expose divisions that were previously difficult to see. The Potter's House therefore stands at a crossroads. Its future will not be decided only by how many seats are filled on a Sunday. It will be decided by whether the church can remain powerful after its identity begins to outgrow its founder. And that leaves the larger question hanging. Can a megachurch built around one extraordinary leader become something equally powerful without becoming a monument to the past? So, what do you think? Is the Potter's House truly losing people? Or is T.D. Jakes' legacy facing its biggest test yet? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.